Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to the webinar Microsoft Teams Governance with Nintex. Speaking today will be John Godey, that's me, I'm a senior managing consultant at Breakpoint Technology. Also be joined by Terry Simpson, who's a senior solutions engineer with Nintex. And to give you an idea of the content that we're going to cover today, we're going to do a quick introduction on Nintex, make sure you understand Nintex solution has to offer, as well as a brief introduction on Breakpoint Technology to understand the services that we provide. Then we'll transition into our governance areas. We're going to have a general discussion on governance topics as it relates to the Microsoft 365 platform. We'll talk about types of governance and specifically drill into container and content governance, which is where the demonstration that Terry will take us through showcases some of the functionality you have within Nintex to support container and content governance. We'll talk a little bit about 365 groups and then some quick start considerations around governance for the platform. And from there, we'll go into the actual Nintex demonstration. For the Q&A, you'll notice in the live meeting that there is a Q&A panel. If you have questions, please drop those into the panel. We'll try to get those addressed as we go through our content today. And now I'd like to kick this over to Terry to give us a quick overview of Nintex.
Very good. Thank you, John. And also thanks for helping organize this. This is a great webinar with some really good content. So thanks for helping to get this organized. So I want to give you a little bit of introduction into Nintex and kind of set the stage for what we're talking about today. It's interesting when you think about digital transformation. It's a term we've been using, or I've been using a lot as well, probably over the last, almost 10 years now, as organizations have worked towards automating processes around the organization and becoming much more digital and less paper-based. And McKinsey did a study here a while back, and the thing that I found interesting out of it is that the average organization that you walk into, almost 68% of the processes that they're involved with are still manual. And it really plays into what we're talking about today in organizations as they work towards getting more digitally transformed. It's a great opportunity to do that. Obviously, this time that we're in with COVID-19 has kind of put folks, maybe their foot on the gas a little bit as far as accelerating some of that digital transformation. Obviously, with video, audio communication, just working remotely. But processes need to be now much more digital because folks are remote and they need to be able to work in an environment where those processes are much more automated. Now, the chart that you see here, I like this chart because it speaks a lot around processes as far as, and also systems. If you look over on the left-hand side, you'll see systems that have, low or high impact as far as automation is concerned, but how complex are they? And so a lot of folks already have some of those complex systems. You've got a email scenario, you've got an ERP system or a CRM, a lot of things that are over there on that left-hand side that sometimes require a lot of coding involved in it. But what we're going to talk about here today are those things that sit in the middle. They're not necessarily super simple, but not necessarily really complex. They're what we would call sophisticated. So things that a business analyst, a project manager might be able to do. So really interesting to kind of see this chart and understand that the majority of folks listening in today probably represent that 68% where you have a lot of processes that sit right in the middle here of things that you can look to automate that should be fairly easy as far as the tool is concerned, but give you a lot of high value. Now, Nintex as a whole, as we get into the next slide here, has a lot to offer around automating processes. I know I fell in love with the platform almost 12 years ago when I was on the consulting side of the business, and it was just workflow. And then eventually Forms was added. But it has tremendously grown over the last several years so that you can sign up for a subscription and get a whole lot of stuff. with that one subscription. So when you look here, working from left to right, the workflow, the forms, the document generation, the extensions framework, the analytics and RPA, all that comes in one nice little package, and then you can add on the Nintex sign or add on ProMap as needed. But what we're going after here is that you've now got a toolkit kind of available to you to leverage when it comes to automating processes around the organization. So that's kind of the whole suite. Now, for today's focus, we're going to focus a lot on workflow and forms in here, in addition to teams, but probably workflow and forms for the most part. So really, really fun to be able to get into this. So John, I'll kind of turn it back to you if you want to talk a little bit about Breakpoint and get into some teams and governance.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Terry. Appreciate it. So Breakpoint Technology, the name Breakpoint Technology does a good job of kind of explaining how we approach engagements and customers. Our approach is really to understand what an organization is trying to do from a business perspective, trying to understand your business processes and maybe the challenges that you're encountering before we start to bring the technology solutions into it. So we really want to have a solid grounding, taking a pause to understand the business challenges that you have, and then bringing the technology in with that. We really try to understand what technology do you have available, and then what do we need to bring in to help augment that stack so that we can deliver the kind of solutions that are required by your business. And as a Microsoft partner, some of the solutions that we focus our attentions to and that we have expertise in are around portal solutions, anything within the Microsoft 365 solution stack. We have experience within that area, specifically around collaboration strategies, any process automation, and anytime we look at needing to extend that platform, we can also do that with custom development solutions to augment the services we have available in the Microsoft solutions. And as part of that, many times the pains that customers are experiencing, a tool like Nintex very often can be leveraged to help get that customer past those pain points and get them to a point where they can be successful with trying to overcome those business challenges. And with that, that's our Nintex and Breakpoint kind of touch points. I'm going to shift now over to talk some about some areas of governance, and really use that to lead into some of the things that Terry is going to show us on the Nintex platform. So this statement, good governance precedes great adoption. It's an interesting statement here, but to put some context around this, let's look at a couple of the Microsoft solutions. So in the past, one of the hottest items that Microsoft had was the SharePoint platform, and SharePoint platform was very successful, widely adopted. In a more current time, the Microsoft Teams platform has come out, and believe it or not, that's even more well received and is even faster growing than the SharePoint platform. So when we have solutions that grow at that type of pace, at that speed, it's easy for things to kind of explode or kind of get out of control, if you will. And that's why we have this mantra of having good governance is going to be a thing that helps support a great adoption process. And that's really needed to support the scale and the growth that the teams can have within an organization. One of the tools that Microsoft has put together for us is an actual Teams adoption framework. And a portion of this is related to governance, but generally the Teams adoption framework is really 3 phases. So part number 1 is really just kind of getting in the door with the platform. So we're doing our startup as kind of a step 1 adoption in our adoption framework. So in this piece, we're trying to get subject matter experts within our team that's going to support the platform. We're trying to get them up to speed on the functionality. So we're trying to build some expertise. We're trying to understand what are the capabilities that we're going to have to provide to our organization to help with the challenges that are in place. So with this startup, we'll start to build out some of our very first teams. One of the most common things that we do is we'll have a team that actually supports the rollout of teams. So we'll have a team so that our group that is working on the rollout plan can actually use the platform to do the planning, do the collaboration, see the features, and understand the tools that are available to deliver on the functionality. And as we kind of evolve that piece and start to move into step 2, which is really kind of an experiment phase where we're trying to take the functionality outside of our core startup team. So we're looking in the organization, trying to find what we call champions, right? So champions, you can think of them as your evangelists, your cheerleaders, ones who can be successful on the platform and can help to communicate out the features that are going to be most valuable to the organization to leverage. We start identifying the early adopter teams. So the teams, the groups within our organization that we know we can solve some of their problems with the platform. So we look for those early adopters. We start to define really the usage scenarios or the use cases for the platform to understand in these kind of scenarios, our organization can be really successful learning and leading with this platform. As we move on to that, so we will have some lessons learned out of that experience. So we'll have groups on, we'll have feedback, we'll have that support cycle that we've built to help with onboarding individuals. And from there, we can start to transition over into the larger rollout. So we have our lessons learned, we've been experimenting with the platform within our organization, then we can start to roll out at scale the features to the rest of the organization. So step 3, that's going to vary per organization. A really large organization, that rollout may be staggered across business units or teams or divisions, departments, or you may be able to do a big bang rollout depending on the size of your organization. But with that, we're leveraging the tools and the learnings that we've learned through the previous phases of the rollout plan. So again, the aka.ms teams adoption, there's many more details on each one of these bullets provided by Microsoft, which are good material to look at as you're planning and getting ready to do your team's rollout. One of the pieces that is kind of built into this adoption framework is the concept of governance. So governance, and when you hear the term governance, I always think of control, but there's really a lot of different flavors of governance that can be in play for an IT organization. And we may have solution governance, so the things that are available for people as applications, discovery governance, security, container content, and even change management governance. So these are all different types or flavors of governance that may exist within an IT organization. And the area that we're going to really focus in on for our content today and for our demo is really around container and content governance. So when we think about container, when we're talking about a container, it's really a place for something. So just kind of as the name implies, it's a place where I can have content, where I can manage access to things and provide that to our teams, to our organization. And as we look at some of the key components of container and content governance, first area is empower our employees. So with Teams, it's a very dynamic, easy to use solution. We want to make sure that our teams are not hindered by our IT team's ability to provide resources to them. So that's one of the big things, is make sure that we have some self-service things built in to the platform and to the process that we're trying to deliver the solution on. You've heard of shadow IT. This can be a big portion, or this can be a cause of shadow IT, which, if you don't know what that is, shadow IT is just, if I can't get the solution from my internal IT team, I may go out on my own and bring some other unsupported application into the organization and try to use that to fit the requirements for what I'm trying to achieve. So, making the solution easy for the employees to use, the users to use, and then classification or identification of content. So within your organization, with any organization, all content is not created equal, if you will. So some content is very kind of general. It's okay for everyone within the organization to see it. It may be even okay for that organization to be visible to people outside of my organization. But some content is going to be very private, needs to be very restricted on who can access that and what kind of actions can be performed upon that content as far as sharing, edits, updates, those kind of things. So classifying and identifying that content is a key portion of an overall governance strategy, as well as applying the appropriate security and permissions to protect that content as it lives within the platform. Fourth area, really around accountability. So we want to make sure that as we have these different containers, we want to make sure that there are individuals who are responsible for that content and responsible for ownership and the management of those resources. This can be important for us. If you remember my reference to the SharePoint environment, one of the things we ran into early on was that content on SharePoint sites, many times content was stale. There was no one really who owned that SharePoint site to keep the content fresh and updated. So that's kind of one example of accountability. We have some tools within the platform to help with identifying those types of resources also. So those are our kind of general areas of container and content governance that we're interested in. And we'll see several of those pieces as we go through our demonstration here in a few minutes with the Nintex platform. So with talking about governance, and we can't really talk about governance within the Teams world within Microsoft or without bringing in the concept of Office 365 groups. So with the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 platform, the concept of groups are how we manage access to the resources that are available within the platform. And as we look at this pyramid, this is really giving us some very distinct kind of areas where we need to manage and control content, and we need to really do it in different ways. So at the top level of our pyramid, we have the company level. So when we think about the kind of content that is managed here that we need to govern, it's really a one-to-many kind of model. So I have one or two people who are pushing very polished, very curated content out to the organization as a whole. So there's not as much dynamic kind of up and down with the content, meaning that the resources here are going to be more long-lived. They're going to have a longer life cycle. They may have many factors like that, which are company-wide. As we drop down a level, this really goes down into the next level down within the organization. So departmental and divisional models, right? So maybe HR teams, finance teams. Think of where we have groups managing benefits and information that needs to go out to our organization. In this model, we likely have several more people creating content and pushing content out. And we probably have some very, very specific kind of channels within that department or division that we're interested in managing the content in. So different model than what we had for the company. Many more people kind of contributing and managing that content. And then flipping down to the third level, the work groups level, this is really where the majority of the kind of robust collaboration and usage of the collaboration platform within Microsoft comes into play. So at our work group level, we have all kinds of projects, groups that are going to need to be spun up frequently, and they're not going to be long-lived in some cases. So it's a churn that exists that we need to govern and manage. So really three different perspectives on how we look at governance. So as you're managing and coming up with your plan for governance for your organization, make sure that you're considering kind of the scope of the content and the user base that you're trying to supply some governance to. So with that, on the governance side, so where can we start? How can we get started with looking at governance, and specifically within the Office 365 groups? Here are some of the quick areas that you can start with. So as you start to look at the platform, who can create groups? Who do we want to have control of creating Office 365 groups, which then allows for the provisioning of resources? Do we want to put in some naming conventions? What about guest access? Are we going to let remote users into our world, into our Teams environment, our SharePoint environment, into OneDrive? Do we want to allow that? So those are all decisions that we have to think about, think through, and manage based on the scenarios that we're trying to support with the platform. What kind of apps do we want to have? within our platform. So if we look in the Teams world, do we just want the Microsoft provided or Microsoft approved applications, or are we okay with users installing some third-party apps from the catalog? All decisions that we have to think about and manage. And a further kind of breakdown on some of these items related to the governance decisions you should be thinking out up front as you start to roll into the Microsoft Teams world and environment. You know, who can create things, the groups. So being able to create groups within SharePoint really has several pieces to it. So I can create, you know, within SharePoint, within Teams, even within OneDrive, and even within Outlook. So if I have restrictions in those areas, that means that we'll need a governance policy in place, or we'll need a governance process in place to help with managing how those resources get provisioned. Content or configuring of expiration, I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit, but for the configure expiration, so I mentioned early on about the staleness or freshness of content. One of the things that the platform allows for related to content is management of the freshness of that. So it can tell me if there's been no activity in a particular Office 365 group for 30, 60, 90, 120 days. It can let me know that, and it can notify individuals and archive that content, so it's not out there just kind of wasting space, not being used. And again, so these are some of the core areas of a initial governance plan. You'll want to revision or revisit the governance strategy that you have as you go through the Teams rollout cycle. So remember, we had kind of steps 1, 2, and 3 with our Teams adoption process. As we go through those different adoption steps, you'll want to revisit and get feedback on the governance that you have in place to make sure that you're supporting with the right level of process at the right points within your organization for the scope of the usage of the resources that you're trying to govern with the platform. So with that, we'll start to transition back over to Terry to do some of the Nintex demonstration related to the governance platform. And again, just a reminder to jump into the Q&A session. If you have questions, drop those into the Q&A piece. And with that, Terry, I'll let you take over the screen there.
Very good. Thank you, John. And that is really, really good content. Kind of sets the stage for what I'd like to show you inside the Nintex platform. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump in and show you how we can provide some automation and definitely some consistency around some of this governance within Teams. So Nintex provides an environment that allows you to automate processes really, really easy in a no-code way. And what I want to do is show you kind of the end user perspective here first on automating a process around Teams. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in here and go ahead and get logged in. So let's, well, not logged in, but fill out a form. And this form is available. You can make this available to anonymous users or even authenticated users as well. So really up to you on how you want to do this. But what's nice about this form is you can build this form to have the data that you want to see in here for this particular environment that we're going to work with. So really, really easy to kind of build this out. Now in this particular form, I'm going to go ahead and create a team called New CRM Project. I'm going to give it a description right here. But more importantly, what I'm going to do for this environment is I want to set up an archival policy. So for this particular team, how long do we think this team is going to be around for? So if I think this team's going to be around for 30 days, let's set it to that. 90 days, 180 days. You really get to kind of control how long that will be around. Is it public? Is it private? You can determine that. Also put a choice option in here to say, hey, are you going to need any additional channels? So let's say, yes, we're going to need them. So you'll see how that kind of hides and shows right there. Then we can go out and click on things like knowledge sharing or monthly reports and all of those elements in order to add content in here. Now I'm going to go ahead and submit this particular form. So I'm the person that's making the request to have this team created. And what I'm going to do, since I'm logged into Teams as a different user, I'm going to log into Teams on my mobile device and show you where this is going to get created. But before I do that, one step that I've introduced in the process here, and I necessarily wouldn't recommend doing it, I'm a big fan of users having kind of instant gratification around creation of these teams. You know, you don't want to have somebody request it and then 3 days later the team gets created. But I went ahead and introduced a step just for kicks right here that we can show you. This email is what I just received from the workflow. So this would be like the manager making a request to create a team. So I got this email, and you can configure this the way you'd like, but you'll see all the data in here. So new team, description, archival policy, 180 days, it's all in here. So the manager can really come in here and click reply using what we call lazy approval, and just type in the word approve and hit send. And that's going to process the request right on to the next step immediately. And the next step in this scenario is we want to go and the team's going to be created for us. So it'll take just a minute, but what's going to happen is the workflow is going to go to our Teams environment, create the team for us automatically, and even create the channels beneath it. So really, really handy for that. And in addition, it's going to go ahead and create it with the naming convention that we have set up in here or dictated in that environment. So there it is. It just popped up right there. So it says follow a new CRM project, and then we have kind of that general channel. But here in just a second, the workflow is also going to create some other channels, and you'll see those show up in just a second. So pretty quick for the workflow to go and create that particular team. And again, if you took the approval step out of it, which I would probably encourage you to do, you'll get a little bit more instant gratification with how fast you can create that team. And you'll see that channel being created there as well. So there's the general channel, the knowledge sharing channel being created as well. So all that stuff is being done in that kind of automated fashion. Now, after the teams are created, or Teams environment and the channels are created, I'm also going to get an email as the requester letting me know that the team has been created. So super, super helpful to kind of automate that. And what I like about it is you're driving the governance of the organization and consistency around those teams. How the team is created, what template is used. I know templates is coming out here. The naming convention around it. You know, just a lot of consistency that is leveraged when creating those items. So what I want to do is I want to then now jump into the Nintex Workflow Cloud environment and show you how we built this on the back end. From the end user's perspective, seeing that being created, it's a fairly simple process, and it's almost just as easy to go out and build something like this. So for some of you, this may be your first exposure to Nintex, so I want to kind of walk you through how the workflow engine works here. I'll actually, before I do that, I want to show you that email that just came in here that shows you, it says, hey, Terry, please note your team site's been created. And we could click here and log right in and get access to that team's environment and start to see that. So nice little instant gratification there at the end, knowing that it's been created. But back to the environment. For those of you that haven't seen the environment, the way this works is that it's a no-code solution. We've got all these actions that are over here on the left-hand side, and then we have the canvas on the right-hand side. So think of these actions as these little Lego pieces, and essentially, whatever you want to build on the right-hand side, take these little pieces, assemble them however you would like, and build out your process. So it's really easy to take one of those actions and drag it over into the canvas and drop it, click on that action, and that's where the configuration is. So I always like to call this configuration. It's not customization, but configuration, because you can then come in and just say, well, where do you want the email to go? What's the subject? What's the body message? Do you want to put an attachment in there? And you'll see when I click on each of these fields, we have this little tab over here that says insert, and you can always refer to the data that you have inside of the workflow. So when we created that form, we could come in and if we had the individual's email address, let's say that was it, you could just say right there. what's the subject message. We could maybe call it whatever the description of the team was or something to that effect. So really, really easy to be able to come in and map this information in here. So all no-code way of being able to configure the workflow. Now, over here on the left-hand side, since we're talking about Teams, we've got a section down here on the bottom left that focuses on Microsoft Teams. So these are the actions that we're using in this particular workflow or series of these in order to get things done. Now, the first thing that we did as an end user is we filled out that form. That's actually the trigger of this particular workflow. So up here at the top, I'm going to click on Nintex Forms. Now, I've got it set up as a form for the trigger, but you could trigger this, on a scheduled basis, maybe when an item is added to SharePoint or Salesforce or some other system. Also, the form itself could be available to anonymous users or authenticated users. Now, in this scenario, the form that I'm filling out, I need to be authenticated. I've got to have my username and password and be logged in order to see the form and fill it out. But you could also make it for anonymous users. Maybe you're going to bring a new vendor on board or partner on board, and you want them to fill out their information and hit submit. And as a part of the process, you may go into your CRM system and create a record and a contact, go create the team, do all that stuff. But great way to kind of involve anonymous users. But the form, this is where you get to kind of dictate what you want to show up on the form and go build it. So this is all no code as well. You can simply just take these controls, drag them on the screen, like email address, and just simply drop it. And you'll see right there we've got that email field on the screen. So if I click on it, I can then configure it on the right-hand side. So I'll call it email address, even move it around a little bit if you want. Now, in this particular form, we're just asking for the team name, the team description. Those are just text fields right here, short text. You just drag it right on the screen. And then the archival policy here is a single choice. So we just set up our choices, and you can dictate this to be different choices as well. And put a little rule on the page here. So we have this little yes/no field, and we put a rule on here that just simply says, and click on this to open it up. Really easy to configure. That field there, did you require additional channels? When it's equal to no, and you'll notice we give you the values. You don't have to guess if it's yes, no, 1, 0, true or false or anything. When it's no, then we want to take group 1, that grouping, and we don't want it to be visible if that condition is met. Otherwise, which means yes, we want the visibility to be yes. So really, really easy to create that rule so that when we hit the button, it shows that different grouping. So really no code involved as well in the creation of the rules. So add the fields that you want on the page, as many as you want. And also we put an image up here for our fake real estate company, and we're off to the races. So really, really easy to be able to build out that request form. And what we're doing with the rest of the workflow here is I made it easy. You'll notice in the email that I got, it called out my name and said Terry on there. I'm actually going in here and getting the manager's information right here. So I'm already logged in. It knows who I am. So we're grabbing me as the individual. That's my email address. And we're going in and getting my manager's information, because that's where we're going to send the email to, is the manager. And then we have this task here, and this is the piece I'd probably remove. You don't want that shadow IT that John was talking about, where if folks aren't getting what they need as far as the teams are concerned, they'll go find other environments to go and collaborate on. If they can't get the organization to create them in timely enough fashion, they'll find their own solutions. I've been guilty of that myself in the past. Not advocating it at all, but sometimes folks do that. But in here, you'll see the task. And in the task, we have 2 outcomes, rejected or approve it. And you can add additional ones in here as well. And all we're doing down here is assigning the task and sending out this email. So when I got that task email there at the very beginning that I showed you right here, this is what it looks like for the end user, but here's how you configure it. So all these little references are in here. References or placeholders is probably a better name to call them. So it says team name, and then whatever team name was supplied in the form, it calls that out. That way you have all the data in the email message. Now, if it is rejected, we're just going to send a little email that says sorry and in the workflow. But we're going to go down the happy path here of approved. And you'll see here, we're going to use that first action in the Teams environment around creating a team. So all you got to do in here is use an account that has the right permissions to go out and create a team. So I'm using this guy, Martin Banks' account. And this is the team name. Now, one of the things that I learned from one of the Microsoft directors here recently is I set this up with Cefalo kind of being in the prefix. I would probably set this up to do it in the suffix so that you could go over here and add it on at the very end. So I'll put the Cefalo at the end. That way it's a little bit easier on the eyes and easier on the end user right here. So very, very straightforward to be able to do that. And then down through here, you'll see some other settings. Guest setting information. So do we want to allow guests? Do we want to allow them to be able to delete the channel? Member settings, messaging settings. So a lot of different things that you can control. But ultimately, we're going to create that team. And you'll notice down here that we're storing that team ID number as a variable because we want to use that later on. Matter of fact, right now, because we want to go in and add an owner to that team. So using that team ID, we're going to make Leroy Brown the owner of that team. And that's important because you may want to have a service account or something like that be the owner of the team. That way, if the owner leaves, you don't have to worry about no one having access to kind of manage the team. And then we ran down here and ran some parallel actions. So you remember when I went in and chose the channel, we have several different channels that we want to create. So we put a little run if statement. We have all these little things in the logic and flow section, one of which is a run if statement. But you can put these rules in here, and these are easy to configure. And it just says, hey, that knowledge sharing drop down, when it is equal to the value of yes, and that was for the knowledge sharing piece, when that condition is met, then we want to do what's inside that box, which is create a team. And we want to give it time to create that team. So we're just going to pause the workflow for, really 30 seconds. So we just put in point for a while less than 30 seconds. So just a few seconds in here that will pause the workflow, and then it'll go on to the next step. So that way it's not progressing too fast. We'll give teams an opportunity to finish what it's doing, and then we go on to the next step. So we'll continue down through here, the knowledge sharing, and then you'll see this one. This one's about the monthly reports channel, the other channel, so all that's in there. And then ultimately, we're going to get this email right here that you saw, which says, hey, your team has been created. So that's that email right here that we received. So really, really handy for that. And that's a dynamic link right there that takes you to your team. But I love the part down at the bottom. As easy as this is, I love this. So all it is a branching by value. So in that form, you went out and created the branch. It branched it out and said, did you select 30, 60, 90, or 180 days or a year? And then all it does is pause the workflow for that period of time. Now, I like this because our workflows can run for a long period of time, not just a month. Like some other tools. But in here, it will pause for that 90 days and then go to that team owner, in this example, Leroy Brown, and it's going to assign them a task and simply say, hey, it's time to review your team's environment. This particular team, more importantly, because your archival period is up. So we're not going to automatically, in this example, archive the team immediately. We're going to give that owner an opportunity to leave it there for a little longer or go ahead and archive it. But what I love about it is if it's 90 days, I've probably completely forgot about the fact that I even created this team, 3 months ago. So it's a nice little reminder to say, hey, it's time to archive it. And then I can just respond to the task with approved and it archives it for me. So I don't even have to know how to archive it technically. It'll just handle it for you. So we're using that area right here to be able to do that. So really, really handy for that. Now, there are a few other actions that are in here as well that allow you to go in and do some other things around governance. Now, we could have, instead of creating a new team, we could have cloned a team, updated the team. We could have restored a team from an archive. That's probably a separate workflow. Also, we could have added additional team members in here. So maybe you're creating a project and you went ahead and typed in all the team members that are a part of the project, and we could add them in here automatically as well. So it takes off some of the lifting of the manual tasks of doing this stuff from individuals and automates it. So it's a very consistent way of making sure to create your teams and managing the teams. Now, one of the things that I'm looking forward as we go into the future and we have more features and actions available is being able to come in here and do some things around auditing teams, not only from an archival perspective, but maybe I'm 3 or 4 months into the project. And what I'd love to do is be able to send an email to the team owner and say, are the people who are in this team, is it still appropriate? Because there may have been team members that left the company or moved on to different roles in the organization, or maybe they left the team. And so in some scenarios, you don't want to have them have access to the team. So it's kind of a security review that you can do and check in a little later on. So great way to come out and add, remove team members. And as additional web services become available around the Teams environment, which they continue to add them, we'll continue to add them in this section over here on the left-hand side. So just a great way to come in and orchestrate this process and build out the team. And you can also incorporate other systems of record in here as well. I was talking about the vendor onboarding example. Maybe your vendor lives within Microsoft Dynamics, and after you have, or during the process of creating this team, you may want to go out and create a record in Dynamics to go out and add that individual to a record, so you can see the different entities. So maybe you want to set up an account in here, and in addition, maybe you want to create a different type of record in addition to an account. Maybe you want to have a contact as well, because not only does the company represented there, but we also have individuals represented. So we could create multiple different types of records, or what Dynamics calls entities, in here. So I was looking for the contact record as well. So it's just, there it is, contact record. So now you can go in and add that contact record and add all the fields that you need. So last name, city, probably state, and the address. I'm sure there's a first name field in here as well, but add whatever fields you need to in here and go and create those records. So what we're going after here is we can orchestrate a process around multiple systems of record, not just teams, but also systems that may not even be listed in the list here. So you can always bring in your own private connectors on the left-hand side as well. So if you've got a system or a CRM or something you want to connect to, and it has a web service, go ahead and leverage that, because you can pull it in and have your own series of items. It's typically those CRUD features, so create, read, update, delete, those type of things that you can do inside of here. So a great way to kind of automate this particular process of creating a team, but also kind of managing the team going into the future. So that's what I've got from a demonstration perspective. I would continue to, or encourage you to add some questions into the Q&A box there if you want to ask some questions. And then what I may do before handing this back over to John to wrap it up is show you a couple resources here that may be good for you to leverage. Now, today's workflow, if you like this, you can always come and download a trial of Nintex and use it and actually import this workflow right in. We created something a little bit while back, maybe 6 months ago, something called the gallery. So this is gallery.nintex.com. And what this allows you to do is see workflows and bot flows and processes that have already been created for you that you can import into your environment. So I've clicked on the workflows here, and you'll see a bunch of workflows here on the right-hand side. You even see some COVID-19 related stuff, vendor onboarding for banks, the SBA PPP program, the loan application here, the forgiveness piece. We've got some workflows around. But we have this governance one right here. It's called Microsoft Teams Governance Team Request. That is the workflow that I just showed you. So you could download this right into your Nintex Workflow Cloud environment and replicate exactly what I have. Or maybe you're over here and you want the loan forgiveness application for the PPP program. You can do that as well. So a lot of different workflows that you can download to kind of kick the tires a little bit and test this out. And ultimately, you can jump into the community site if you have want to do some kind of self-help questions, curious what all we do and what features we have related to the Nintex platform. So great way to be able to automate and orchestrate processes around your organization. So John, let me do this. Let me kind of kick it back to you and see if you have any other comments or kind of things to close us out or anything else related to Breakpoint and the awesome services that you guys offer. I think you guys are an important part of the equation because at Nintex, we don't offer any professional services and we really rely on great partners like Breakpoint in order to provide those services. So that way, if you need their help in building out a workflow or a form or a process, you know, there's great resources to be able to help you with that.
Yep, very good. Great. Thank you very much for that. That was a great walkthrough with the Nintex platform. I'm always amazed at the continuing evolution of the actions that show up in Nintex. A great set of tools there for integration and orchestration across a lot of the Microsoft stack. So that's great stuff, Terry. Thank you so much. So I'm going to share just a couple things real quick. Apologies, had a problem there sharing my screen. The survey, I posted a link to the survey for the event in the chat, the live Q&A. So the survey is breakpoint.technology/survey. If you can go there and put some comments on the webinar, we would appreciate your feedback on that. If you have a need to look at your processes within the Microsoft stack, if you feel like some of your governance processes, or if you are wanting to engage on some of the Nintex type functionality that we have available, I would encourage you to reach out to us on the Breakpoint website. I'm also going to put my email address in the Q&A, and you can reach out to me directly if you have questions about governance, if you have questions about Nintex or portions of the Microsoft 365 platform. Happy to do a back and forth with you on that, answer any quick questions for you. We have different offerings at Breakpoint Technology. One of those is a collaboration roadmap that we can do for you. That is a process where we will work with your business owners to understand the collaboration models that you have and help you understand how the platform can be leveraged to support many of those types of collaboration scenarios. So again, feel free to drop a survey out there for us on the webinar. Reach out to me, john.goatee@breakpoint.technology, if you have any specific questions or interest in learning some more about the solutions and the offerings that we have available. Thank you so much for joining us today on this webinar. We look forward to hearing from you soon.